Everybody. This is the Harbinger Report, and I am John Bell, also known as the fifth man of the apocalypse, or fifth horse rider, something like that. Anyway, also known as the Bell Tower. All right. Anyway, doing things a little bit different tonight with all the threat of nuclear war and world war. I decided that I was going to do something a little different and just try to cover some of that information. A lot of stuff that's going on in the media right now is very can be very deceiving. So I wanted to try to give people a little bit of a kind of counter balance or some things to think about when considering all that we're seeing in the world and the war right now, and all that kind of stuff. So let's get into it. Um, First off, I had an article to show you, and it is not in my queue, which just took me 2 hours to fix and create. Anyway, it was a story. See if I can find it on my phone real quick. It's a story about a new bird flu virus that people are already starting to talk about and say is some high craziness. So I'm trying to see if I can find it real quick. There it is. So um, Deja flu, the article reads. Scientists say bird flu pandemic could be 100 times worse than the last one after US and China collaborated on strengthening strains. So anyway, that was just a news report that there's a potential new thing out there and that it's bad and it's already scaring people, and people are already asking. I don't know anything about it, no name or anything else like that, other than the only thing the news reported was that it was potentially jumping from avian birds, fowl, to cattle, and then from there to humans somehow. So I don't know anything else about it. Go try and find it in the news. They're claiming it's going to be the next thing. Some politicians, what I won't name, have come out lately and said that, oh, they could be using this to, help control the next election, lockdowns and things like that. Anyway, I'm just reporting that as the news has been talking about that to public. I don't know anything about it, but if you're hearing anything, that could be one of the things you're hearing about. Now, the topic of the show tonight is World War III. All right, it's about nuclear holocaust. Um, a lot like the intro video you see on my show. So, getting started with that, this is the most important thing that you must understand when it comes to war. Okay, um, I um, I served in the military. I served in law enforcement. I've been studying these things for a long time. And the first rule of war, the very first rule of war, is this, and it's from a famous author, Sun Tzu, a Chinese author, in a book he wrote called The Art of War. And the very first lesson is all warfare is based on deception. That means if you have any clue that you think you understand what's going on in politics in the world right now, you do not. Because what you hear in the news and the media is not the same as reality that's actually going on in many cases. Now, are we heading to war? Yes. Um, are we heading to a worldwide war? Yes. Are we heading to nuclear war? More than likely, yes. Has it already started? More than likely, yes. I mean, if you study World War One and World War Two, we are dangerously close to following those same paths. Right now, the world is taking sides and drawing lines in the sand, and that's going to be one of the major topics I discuss this evening. Okay, so again, I really want to emphasize this point. If you think you understand what's going on in the news, you do not. All right. All warfare is based on deception. That means it is all lies, not lies that it's happening, but lies about, oh, he said, she said, he's starting it, they're starting it, blah, 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 blah. All right. It's deception, it's lies. There's going to be a lot of trickery going on. Okay. Now, to try and pull some of this up, this is what I want to show. Okay. So France sets its military goal as war is back in Europe. Okay. That's Associated Press. All right. Macron sends troops to Ukraine. All right. Um, Then France, Macron says Europe must be ready if Russia escalates. Okay, now there's a big thing right there because I would really argue, and this is something I've been following for a long time. Russia's not the one escalating. All right. I grew up Russia, Russia, Russia. In the military, it was Russia, Russia, Russia. Um, but I can tell you, if you follow what's going on closely in the world, and you're not listening to Fox News, um, you're not listening to CNN and these people, which that's all propaganda. In fact, when I served in intelligence, they taught us we can't control an entire nation, so we do it psychologically. We create a right and we create a left, and we create warriors on both sides so that we control the whole thing and what you think. That's how it works. Mainstream news media, it's all controlled, it's all state propaganda, and it is all 100% propaganda. All right. There actually was a law that was an anti-propaganda law in the US, and the US relatively recently removed that law. Used to be illegal. Now it's not illegal anymore because they just removed it. Why would you do that? If you didn't have bad intentions, why would you do that? All right. I think during the Bush administration, Bush Jr., I'm talking about, he got busted paying $6 million to news agencies for favorable news. That's not free and independent press. That's not journalism. In fact, I would really argue journalism is almost dead in our country. News agencies, they don't have real journalists. They have actors, and those actors, they uh, they read from scripts. They read from teleprompters. They read what their editors tell them to read, and if they don't, they're fired, and they just hire someone else. If they go off script, they fire them and they hire someone else. Ask Tucker Carlson. All right, key point. All right, you buck the system too much. You don't follow their party line. You're out, and that's a dangerous, 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 dangerous thing because it used to be in the United States we believed in freedom of speech. All right. Doesn't mean people had to agree. And here's what people don't understand. You know what the definition of freedom of speech is? It means you have the right to offend people. You have the right to offend people. Because if you can't offend people, you can't speak truth or your truth, you know? So, and another thing about it is, censorship, especially free speech, and we're seeing this more and more in our world and our country today, and it's alarming that it goes against the antithesis, the soul of our country. All right. Free speech is so that we have a platform as a free people. If you lose why do you think free speech was made the number one constitution? Honestly, I almost think right to bear arms ought to be because without it, you don't have free speech. But why do you think they made it the number one constitution? It is the most important thing. If you do not have free speech, you do not have freedom. Period. End of story. Drop the mic. You don't have freedom. It's an illusion. So, do we have freedom today? Well, many argue you do, but they're like, oh, well, all these companies, it's not the government censoring you, it's the company censoring you. Yeah, well, when those companies are in bed with the government, that's called fascism. That's the definition of fascism. And that's what we're seeing today. And the government's like, oh, we're not doing it. We're not the ones doing it. They are. Yeah, but they're working for you, or you're working together. Simpatico. You know what I'm saying? That's the definition of fascism. And that's the end of freedom. Communism, socialism, fascism, those are the opposite of freedom, of liberty, of capitalism. Everyone's like, oh, capitalism's so bad now, it's got to go. No, capitalism works. It works. It's the people who abuse the system that make it not work and then want to turn around and blame everyone for that. Now, I'll give you a case in point. It wasn't that long ago when Russia, the USSR, the Soviet Union, when it was completely right? They embraced Christianity. First of all, don't listen to what Fox and CNN tell you because they will tell you something completely different. But if you go listen to Putin and you listen to their generals and what they say out of their own mouths, They say we recognized our error with communism, with socialism. We rejected communism. We rejected socialism. We kicked that out of our country. We've embraced Christianity and we've embraced capitalism. And in just a few years, not that long since the end of the Cold War and the collapse, their economic fall, they've remerged in a very, very short time as a world superpower. How did they do that? They did it through capitalism, because that's how effective capitalism actually is when you do it right. When you do it right, that's how it is. And capitalism, freedom, Christianity, they always go together. Always. Just like socialism, communism, fascism, they always go together. And you know what they do? They destroy countries. They don't work. They always fail. But the reason why they're employed is because they are perfect weapons of destruction. Perfect weapons of destruction for eroding a country from the inside. And that's why the actors that be manipulate our system and funnel the money and all channel it in all the right areas in absurd amounts to facilitate those things. And this is a long game. I mean, it's not. First of all, I mean, you had the education in America. It's almost all communist. Colleges today, they're almost all communists. It's almost all socialism. I mean, it's indoctrination camps into those ideologies. All right, that's what they are. You should never send your kids to these schools. That's what state schools have become. Even private and religious schools, they've more and more been taken over by this, and they're not going to teach the values of Christianity. They're not going to teach the values of family. They're going to teach the values of their system and their agenda, which is communism, socialism, fascism, and that leads to all the other insanity isms I won't even get into. That is just nothing more than demonic possession. Demonic possession. And you wonder why these people are irrational, can't handle anything, they're crazy, they have psychotic breaks. There's the depression is so high, suicide is so high with these groups of people. That's why. You let the demon in an ordered house, it's going to disorder the house. That's what it does. That's its whole purpose. There's a reason God says follow these laws and try to be moral and ethical people, because then you have a moral and ethical society. And if you can destroy the people and their values and morality, then you destroy the family, you destroy the society. There's no turning back. Hello, Sodom and Gomorrah. No case in point in history. What about Rome? What about Rome? Hello? I mean, we're literally living the fall of Rome and we're asking, why? What's going on? Why is this not working? You know? If you don't follow history, you're doomed to repeat it. If you don't follow history, you're doomed to repeat it. And that's what we're doing. We're repeating history. And these people are very smart. They're not stupid. These globalist elites I'm referring to that serve Satan, and that's what it's all about. See, the thing is, we are born into a spiritual war, a battle between the forces of good and the forces of evil. That's what this life is about. God gives you free choice. He will not force himself on you or force you to love him or serve him. He will present everything out there, and you, over your lifetime, have to make the choice. All right? And that's what this life's all about. That's why this world is, in theology, is called the church militant, because it's the church at war. We're literally at war between just like it all goes back to Lucifer, Satan, whatever you want to call him in the Garden of Eden. Oh, if you do what I say, then I will give you the keys to live immortally forever. It's the same thing in the garden. You hear these globalist elites saying, what did Elon Musk say? He said at these billionaire parties behind closed doors, what are they doing? They're saying they're contacting entities, demons, and they're saying that they'll give them life extension technology and make those elites into gods, immortal gods, as long as they're willing to kill off all the rest of us. All right? Elon Musk was going around warning people about this. Okay? So it's it's a high craziness, but we have to realize what we're facing and what we're in the middle of. You can't win a war that you don't know you're in. You can't win a battle that you don't know you're in. So you better figure out quickly that you're in a battle. There's this what was it, 13th Warrior movie one time, and they're about to get attacked, like, and this guy's like, "Hey, I'm not a warrior," and the guy next to him says, "Hey, in a few minutes, little brother, you will be." Doesn't mean you'll live. You might not be a very good one, but you're going to be a warrior in a few minutes because we're getting invaded. We're getting attacked. Similarly, we're getting invaded in our country right now. But anyway, back to it. So, France Macron says Europe must be ready if Russia escalates. And again, I argue Russia's not the one escalating. However, it seems like everybody and their grandmother is escalating against Russia. And listen, I'm no uh, okay, button. I'm no Russiophile. You know what I mean? I'm not some big lover of Russia. I love my country. I'm a patriot. I bleed red, white, and blue. I love my country, and I serve my country, and I come from a family that serve this country. So so it's but I believe in truth, and I believe in calling things the way I see them. And there's a lot of deception going on out there, and I think it's important that that there are counter voices out there that are offering a counterbalance to suggest that there could be more to the eye and that we could be, being manipulated. Okay, so I hit that one already like 10 times. So moving on, defense chief revamps Germany military for to prepare for war. So what is this getting at? Now, France is saying they're getting ready for basically world war. And what I just showed you is defense chief in Germany is saying the same thing this last week. They are getting ready for world war. All right. Germany braces for decades of confrontation with Russia. All right. Again, they're targeting Russia. France is targeting Russia. Germany is targeting Russia, saying we're getting ready for war. All right. Um, then you've got Poland. Poland preparing for threat of war with Russia, defense minister says. All right. These are all recent. Poland defense minister addresses Russian threat, prepare for anything. Okay. Then you've got NATO allies prepare for unprecedented air deployment exercises over Europe and show of force to Russia. All right. Now, it's Russia. The only thing Russia is saying is, hey, we're going to defend ourselves if you force us to. But stop, stop, stop. And every other country saying, hey, no, we're going to kick Russia's butt. We're gearing up right now. We're coming over to your house. We're grabbing our shotguns. We're coming to your house. Get ready. Russia's saying, hey, I'm locking my doors. I don't want any trouble. Leave us alone, you know? But that's not what's happening. So, France, Germany, Poland, NATO, okay? And of course, the US is already there starting war. So that's another one. UN, same thing. England, MI6, same thing. All right. Balkan vows to have Ukraine join NATO as globalist narrative unveils. Okay. Now that's huge. That's huge because um, they had a deal with Putin that would not happen. That was one of the things in the past that Putin insisted, look, you have to stop here. This is our line. And so they know very well by adding them to NATO that it's going to, and then the UN, it's going to push Putin's hand. It's going to force his hand. And that's exactly what they're trying to do. Okay, so uh, Nord Stream gas sabotage. Who's to blame for that? All right. Okay, now that I showed, I'm going to transition here just a little bit. So at first, I wanted to make the case that recently Germany is saying they're escalating for war with Russia, preparing for it. France said the same thing. Poland saying the same thing. NATO saying the same thing. US is already there doing that. So that means you're seeing a coalition, and England, MI6, they're also already there doing that, I would argue. So you're seeing the world coalition forces now all coming against Russia. All right. Um, and they're all saying, "Oh, we got to do this in case Russia comes after us." But the problem is, it's everyone else that's ganging up to attack Russia and to provoke Russia and Putin right now. That's what's really going on. All right, and that's what I want to try to make a case for. Okay, and so part of that would be the Nord Stream pipeline, because that was one of the big events that was gonna give a lot of gas and money for their pipeline, and it was sabotaged. Okay, so I want to point that out, and Putin blames it on the West, and he does it rightly so. And now I'm gonna transition this to a little video on the topic.
History happening now.
Tucker, this is a case where you have the motive. The U.S. has long been trying to stop the Nord Stream 2 because, as Cy Hirsch's story points out, the U.S. has recognized that if Nord Stream 2 goes online, that would make it a lot more difficult for the U.S. to wage a proxy war against Russia, because Germany will not want to be on board with cutting off its source of cheap energy. So the U.S. found an answer to that problem. They blew it up. And it's interesting. Hirsch reports that the planning for this operation began in late 2021. And that's when Russian forces were massing on the border of Ukraine, and there was a threat of the invasion. But something else happened. Russia, in that same month of December 2021, when planning was underway at the White House to blow up Nord Stream 2, Russia also submitted draft treaties to the U.S. and NATO, laying out detailed proposals for the U.S. and NATO to resolve their issues, to roll back NATO military infrastructure in states surrounding Russia. Now, we know what happened to that because the U.S. rejected it, wouldn't even discuss the core issue of Ukraine not joining NATO. Instead, the U.S. chose to basically let the Russian invasion happen. And then when that happened, proceeded to engage in this operation to blow up Nord Stream 2. And they've made no secret about their embrace of this. The day after the Nord Stream 2 was sabotaged, Antony Blinken declared that this was a tremendous strategic opportunity. And most recently, you've covered this, Victoria Nuland testified in Congress that she is grateful, along with the White House, that the Nord Stream 2 is now a hulk of metal at the bottom of the sea.
Okay, so real important takeaway from that. Putin, as he often does, sued for peace. He drafted up documents, tried to get people at the table, and he wanted to de-escalate the situation. And you heard the response. The U.S. said, nope, we're not even taking the phone call. All right? We reject the deal. We don't want peace. We want war. That's what it is. If you don't want peace, you want war. All right? He's the one trying to say, I want peace. We're the ones saying we want war. We don't want to talk. We got nothing to talk about. We just want war. But we want to blame you for starting a war, not us. Trying to make ourselves look innocent when we're the aggressors. All right? So that's a huge, huge important point. And you're going to see this. You're going to see this again.
Who blew up Nord Stream?
You for sure.
I was busy that day. Nate, do you have I did not blow up Nord Stream. Thank you, though.
У вас лично, может быть, есть алиби, у вас лично.
You personally may have an alibi, but the CIA has no such alibi.
Do you have evidence that NATO or the CIA did it?
Знаете,
You know, I won't get into details, but people always say in such cases, look for someone who is interested. But in this case, we should not only look for someone who is interested, but also for someone who has capabilities. Because there may be many people interested, but not all of them are capable of sinking to the bottom of the Baltic Sea and carrying out this explosion. These two components should be connected. Who is interested and who is capable of doing it?
But I'm confused. I mean, that's the biggest act of industrial terrorism ever, and it's the largest emission of CO2 in history. Okay, so if you had evidence, and presumably given your security services, your intel services, you would, that NATO, the US, CIA, the West, did this, why wouldn't you present it and win a propaganda victory?
В войне пропаганды очень сложно
In
победить.
the war of propaganda, it is very difficult to defeat the United States because the United States controls all the world's media and many European media.
Европейских
The ultimate beneficiary of the biggest European media are American financial institutions. Don't you know that? So it is possible to get involved in this work, but it is cost prohibitive, so to speak.
мы можем
We can simply shine the spotlight on our sources of information, and we will not achieve results.
формулировать так ясно, что
It is clear to the whole world what happened, and even American analysts talk about it directly. It's true.
Yes, but here's a question you may be able to answer. You worked in Germany, famously. The Germans clearly know that their NATO partner did this, and it damaged their economy greatly. It may never recover. Why are they being silent about it? That's very confusing to me. Why wouldn't the Germans say something about it?
ну, меня это тоже удивляет.
This also confuses me. But today's German leadership is guided by the interests of the collective West rather than its national interests. Otherwise, it is difficult to explain the logic of their action or inaction.
Объяснить,
After all, it is not only about Nord Stream 1, which was blown up, and the Nord Stream 2 was damaged. But one pipe is safe and sound, and gas can be supplied to Europe through it. But Germany does not open it. We are ready, please.
но Германия же не открывает его.
There's another route through Poland, called Yamal Europe, which also allows for large flow. Poland has closed it, but Poland pecks from the German hand. It receives money from the pan-European funds, and Germany is the main donor to these pan-European funds. Germany feeds Poland to a certain extent, and they close their route to Germany. Why? I don't understand. Ukraine, to which the Germans supply weapons and give money. Germany is the second sponsor of the United States in terms of financial aid to Ukraine. There are two gas routes through Ukraine. They simply closed one route, the Ukrainians. Open the second route and please get gas from Russia. They do not open it.
Откройте второй маршрут.
Why don't the Germans say, look guys, we give you money and weapons, open up the valve, please, let the gas from Russia pass through for us. We're buying liquefied gas at exorbitant prices in Europe,
Втридорого покупаем сжиженный газ.
which brings the level of our competitiveness and economy in general down to zero.
Способность экономики слома до нуля.
Do you want us to give you money?
Хотите, чтобы мы
Let us have the decent existence. Make money for our...
Okay, one thing I wanted to point out from what he just said was he talked about the collective West versus nationalism. All right. That's a very important point for our world and our understanding today. See, Putin is a nationalist. All right. Trump was a nationalist. These are people who say, I'm not following globalist coalitions with other countries. I'm putting my country first. I'm putting the importance of my country first. That's the difference between this coalition of Western countries and a nationalist. All right. So nationalism is not a bad thing when you want the best for your country. That's all it is. Like when we said that there's a lot of one-sided trade deals, especially like with China and the car industry, right? So when we try to change that and say we just want this much back from this gigantic pie, right? They throw a fit. They're like, no, we're used to our one-sided trade where we're getting rich and you're getting broke, and we're stealing all your intellectual property and putting the process. We're undercutting all your labor with slave labor that you can't compete with in your country, thus stealing your manufacturing base as well as your intellectual property. So I mean, these are markers that why would our government leaders put us in this position unless their goal was just to destroy our country? And we see that going on. We see it going on with the dollar. We see it going on with, you don't have to be an economist to understand that they're spending so much that they know they're creating an economic collapse. They're spending so much like there's no responsibility. Like there's not going to be any burst to the bubble. I mean, That doesn't even make common sense. It's impossible to spend that much. Do you realize in the entire history of the United States, our deficit from the entire history until the Biden administration, they've doubled and tripled the national deficit from what the entire history of the US to this one single administration. What does that tell you? That tells you they're trying to destroy our economy and tank the dollar. Now, you want to add to that supply chain breakdowns. You want to add to that we're destroying, they're buying up and destroying farmland from all these globalists right now. Well, that's not scary, right? It was Tim Kennedy, former UFC fighter, Army Special Forces, that talked about in 1 year alone, there are 900 key infrastructure facilities destroyed inside the United States in 1 year. In 1 year. These are key places for building ammunition, for food production, for key infrastructure things that are needed. Blown up, planes crashing, mechanical explosions. I mean, this is by design. This is by design. This is not an accident. And them bringing us to war is also by design. It's not an accident. So I try to show how you've got all these coalition forces with Germany, France, Poland, the NATO, the U.S. and England's already in it, are all teaming up now against Russia. We're all saying that Russia's the threat. We have to mobilize against Russia. When Russia's the only one saying, we want peace, we want to de-escalate, and no one else will come to the table. No one else will come to the table. Yet, they continue to attack and provoke Russia, like the Nord Stream pipeline, which was a major deal. All right. Now, switching gears here a little bit, and I'm going to swing back. I just want to talk about like different issues in the world. So what's going on with Russia right now is a major topic and issue. So that's one of the biggest hot points, but it's not the only one. So that's why I'm going to switch gears here a little bit and talk about this. So you got new UN experts report Israel of committing genocide in Gaza, accuses Israel of committing genocide in Gaza. Okay. Now, you're all familiar with this, what's going on in the news right now. In my last episode, I talked about the red heifer and how that's significant. And for those that don't know, here's my take on what's going on in Gaza right now in Israel. All right. Now, I'm no, great expert on this. I'm calling this as a common sense thing, having a little bit of a military background and having been there. I've been to Israel. I've been to Jerusalem. I've been to the Wailing Wall. I've been to the Temple Mount. I was able to walk in the Dome of the Rock and put my hands on the dome, on the rock itself. I was able to walk into the Great Mosque right next door. And it was an interesting experience. I do not care for the Palestinians. I don't like the way that they look at people that if you're not Muslim, you're worthless. I mean, you don't have value. They can lie, they can cheat, they can steal to your face, and it's okay. They think they're morally justified in that. And that's some of the things I experienced and when I spent time with some of the Palestinians in Palestine there in Jerusalem. And it really was an eye opener for me. People don't understand the history that's going on with Islam and Christianity, and these people have no love. They believe, and the Quran teaches, and I'll argue any Muslim that says different. The Quran teaches that you offer an infidel Islam. If he refuses, you offer him your sword, which means you cut their head off. The problem is they believe in conversion through force, through violence. All right. And you can't have peace with a group that believes that the only way to succeed is by killing you. That doesn't work. And as Christians, we want to be peacemakers, right? Jesus, through the Bible, always talks about being a peacemaker. But that doesn't mean we're pacifists either. So that's a modern misnomer in theology. Christians are not called to be pacifists. We're called to be warriors. All right. We're called to be warriors. Too many today teach that Christianity is about being passive. Now, does it teach turn the other cheek? Yes. Does it teach sue for peace? Yes. But here's how that works. If my enemy comes to me and wants peace, then I'll do everything to make peace. If my enemy comes to me and says they're here to kill me and my family and my people, there can be no peace. There cannot be peace. There is just war theory. And in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, it states, and a lot of Catholics don't know this, and you're wrong for that, because you should know your faith. You should know your catechism. You should know your Bible. But that said, the Catechism of the Catholic Church, I've gotten arguments with Catholics about this, because they're trained to be pacifists by a lot of modern preachers, pastors, priests, and they're wrong. We're not pacifists. We're warriors. God doesn't call us to be pacifists. He says the lukewarm he spits out of his mouth. If you're going to be good, be good. If you're going to be evil, be evil. But if you're just going to be a weak little cuck, then God hates cowards. God hates cowards. God hates cowards. All right. Now, that doesn't mean we want violence, but it means if violence comes, we're ready for it and we don't back down from it. All right. The Catechism teaches that you have not only a right, but a duty to defend people against harm and violence, including your own person, yourself. You have a duty for that, to defend yourself and others, I ask people all the time, like, what happens if some predator tries to like kidnap your daughter? What are you going to do? You're just going to be like, oh, well, I got to be a pacifist. Like, I can't be violent. Really? I'm going to kill the son of a gun person thing. I'm going to send him back where he came from. Hell. Anyway, moving on. So, Export warns, accuses Israel of committing genocide in Gaza. All right. Now, I just stated I have no great love for Palestinians. Now, I don't have hate for them either. And I'm sure that there are good Muslims. I don't care for Islam and Muslims. I just don't. I know that's not a politically correct thing to say, but I'm sorry. That goes back to that free speech thing and being able to have the right to offend people. People offend me all the time and they don't care, especially if it's liberal or politically correct. I find things offensive all the time, but then no one cares. So why should I care if they say that what I'm saying is offensive? No, it's truth. And they want to make it to where it's going to be a hate crime to speak truth and put you in prison for that because they're favoring one ideology over another. That's not freedom. It's not freedom. That's slavery. Give me freedom or give me death. Bring it. But I'm not, you can't have it both ways. And unfortunately, we're switching from one side of the pendulum to the other, where it's taking away our liberty and freedom. And here's the greatest thing about liberty and freedom. You can't ultimately take it away because it's something that people are willing to fight to die for. That's what freedom's about. The problem is people don't understand freedom isn't free. Where'd you ever get this concept that just because there's freedom in the name doesn't mean it's free? It's paid for in blood. It's paid for the blood of our countrymen, of our ancestors. And unfortunately, the tree of liberty is fed by the blood of tyrants and martyrs, libertarians. And it's always the few that do what the many are unwilling to do. I'm not calling for violence, but I am saying we got to be ready to defend ourselves when violence comes, and it's coming. That's a fact. So back to Muslims. I'm not saying there can't be good Muslim people out there. I'm sure there are, and I have nothing against them. That said, you got to be very careful because if you study what Islam does in countries, it always sends their people to other countries. And you can have very peaceful people coming in. They tell them, don't cause waves. behave. But then when enough of them arrive there, well, then the militant ones start coming in. And the militant ones go to the non-militant ones and say this: you do what I say, or your wife and daughter are going to be, they're going to disappear in horrible, horrible ways that you're going to witness. And then they're going to disappear. So what happens? So the moderate ones now start obeying the militant ones, and boom, overnight, you got an army. You got an army. Dude, there's parts of Europe right now where, like, they've run so many of the Europeans out of neighborhoods. They go like car bombing their cars at night with like Molev cocktails and stuff like that. Or you even have in parts in countries where they have rules where the older citizens have to get out of a house to make way for immigrant families, which that's not right. Or here's another little trick they do. See, this is news you're not going to hear in the West. All right. You're not going to hear this on the news. All right. You're not going to hear about the massive rape gangs and things that have gone on of mothers and their children and their daughters. You will hear next to nothing about this. It's a massive, massive problem that's going on in our world today, and it's not right, and it's unjust. It's unjust. I want peace and love for everybody in every culture, including the Muslims. But you can't come in with war or say it's not war when it is. See, and that's where we're being stuck. We're being put. Like I said, I went to Vancouver, Canada, and there's almost no Canadians there. They've all been pushed out by the immigrants. See, and they have laws that say that if you offend an immigrant, you go to jail. Well, but here's the crazy part. The crazy part is you don't have to actually say anything to offend them. As long as they just perceived that you offended them, then that meets the criteria for the law and you go to prison. If people are squatting in your house, if they're breaking in your house, you have no protection. If they're raping your children, you've got no protection. All right? There was one story about a girl who was kidnapped by two students, immigrant students at her school, and they did unspeakable things to her. She went to the police after escaping, after like 17 hours of captivity, and the police said it was her fault. Didn't punish the kids. She had to go back to school with them and see them every day. Is that justice? No. There's another trick they do in a lot of European places where they're like, oh, we got to make way for these immigrants. So you either have to be kicked out of your own home or you got to take these families in your home. The problem is once you take the family and you're responsible for all food, payments, bills, and everything for them. And because they're an aggressive, the males are very aggressive, what happens is they form a gang and they take over your house, your wife, and your children, all become slaves to them and their desires in unspeakable manners. This is going on all over the place. There's parts of England where 80% of the new babies being born are through immigrants to the country. All right. There's a story I told where there was this guy in England who said he owned like a hotel or something. And the government came to him and said, hey, we want to house all these immigrants here. We're trying to do a charitable act and, get them homes and integrate them into the society. And the man's like, oh, that sounds like a good, charitable deed to help these people in need. So he's like, okay, I'll, you can hire out my hotel. So they started moving in there, and he got papers that were manifests of the number of people, their names and numbers for the people that were staying there. Well, then he noticed that there was all these like strange boxes that they were unloading in his warehouse for the hotel. And he started asking the military personnel, hey, what's going on? And what's with all these boxes? And they told him, shut your damn mouth. Mind your P's and Q's. Typical military response, right? So this guy, he's like, okay, this doesn't sit well with me. This is my place, my house, So he's like, I want to know what's in those boxes. So he went in there with a crowbar and he started opening up these crates. And guess what man found? He found automatic machine guns. He found bulletproof vests. He found like grenades and ammunition and stuff like that. And he found manifest papers that was connecting those crates to the individuals living in his hotel. So that man claimed, he's like, look, I'm not going to be a part of my people being attacked by foreigners or taken over. He's like, so he said he moved those crates to an undisclosed location, and he said he refuses. He doesn't care what happens to him. He says he's not going to let them have that or use his hotel for attacking his people. Now, when it comes to the immigration here in our own borders, there's a right here, about 20 minutes away from me. There's a I don't know what you call it, an immigration camp full of Muslims, and these aren't nice Muslims. These are people that have no manners, have no respect, no education. They're very violent, and there's just like trash on society that when they come here. It's like when Trump said that time, why don't we get all the trash in this country? Used to be an immigrant to this country, you had to prove that you were educated and you had a career and something to contribute and a desire to want to be a part of the American dream and assimilate to that. You know, that's not what these people do. They do not assimilate. They try to force you, when the numbers are big enough, to assimilate into their culture. All right, where they start saying, oh, now your own wives and daughters have to start following Sharia law, and you got to start wearing hijabs and stuff like that. You know, you got to follow their laws, not the other way around. But anyway, one of these guys beat a woman with a crowbar. Yeah, real nice quality person we're bringing in our country, right? Beat a woman with a crowbar. He called the police. The police came and arrested him. My buddy was doing security for this place, and he had to go and clean up this guy's room and get his collectibles together, you know, stuff. And he said he found some odd stuff there, and I don't remember exactly what it was. It was kind of military style stuff, but the kicker is he had an ID card. This is just a playing card, but he had an ID card that stated he was a UN military soldier. Really? So you got to ask yourself, and we're finding more and more and more reports that are coming across the U.S. border. There are people of different nationalities and Muslims that are carrying UN military soldier cards on their possession, as well as credit cards. It's giving them a whole bunch of money, by the way. But anyway, so that is a major threat to our country. That's literally an invasion of our country. And I mean, you can't put it any other way. We're being invaded, and it's our own government and our own leaders that are opening the doors and bringing the invasion in because they're serving their purpose against us. And that's what it comes down to. You can't cut it any other way. All right. Now, General Flynn, who was put in prison and unjustly so, it's been released now. And of course, you all are familiar with that. He's just come out with a movie called FlynnMovie.com, I believe, the Flynn movie or Flynn movie, FlynnMovie.com. Try and go look that up. He's releasing his movie where he talks about his situation and how he was unjustly wrongfully sent to prison for trying to defend our country against these globalists in positions of power and authority in our government right now, who are not serving our needs, wants, or desires or agenda, but are serving their own, which is globalist, which is ultimately satanic. All right. And I say globalist because what it is they do not have allegiance to America or Americanism. All right. The values of what it is that we value as Americans, like family and freedom and all that kind of stuff. These people, I call them globalists because their allegiance lies with creating a one world government. That's their whole purpose. And they believe that in order to create this one world government, they have to destroy the existing systems in our world. That's what the Great Reset actually is. It has nothing to do with a pandemic. It has to do with they're going to restructure all our countries and society. That's the Great Reset. That's the Build Back Better. The Build Back Better. Order out of chaos. the rise of the phoenix that goes up in flames and is rebuilt anew, order out of chaos. Okay, that's what we're experiencing. They want to destroy the system. They got to destroy the United States, because the United States is one of the last major bastions of nationalistic pride and freedom, and people who are willing to stand up for freedom and believe in freedom. They haven't been cucked by the government as much as Europe has already. You know, where slowly they gave up their power and authority and guns to the point that they're just slaves now to the system. And if you don't go along with the system and then the liberalism of that system, you're canceled. You're cut off, like the China social credit score. And don't think for 2 seconds that's not coming right here, because I promise you this, it was invented in China so that it could be a test to make sure it works before they did it to us here. That's the whole purpose of it. That's the whole purpose. And I'll swing back to that. But anyway, so we've got a lot of things gearing up for war. All right. We got the genocide that we see going on in Gaza. Now I'll swing back to that too. So the Palestinians, right? And then you've got the Israelis that live there. And look, I tell you, I know Mossad officers, and they're impressive people. They're very impressive people. There's a lot of people in Israel I really admire, going way back in their history to some of their famous rabbis that I've read about. You know, I unfortunately I'm not good with their names, but like Hittel and Gamaliel. You know, two of the more famous. Forgive me for not pronouncing the names correctly. It's been a while, but two of the most famous rabbis in Jewish history. And in fact, both of them knew Jesus and spoke with Jesus back in the day. But anyway, there's a lot to admire about Israel. There really is. But what's going on right now, I think, is really bad. When I was in Jerusalem, our bus was attacked by an Israeli kid who was angry that we were there as Americans on, visiting the Holy Land, and but other than that, most people were really nice to us there. But that said, what's going on right now? Here's my take on what's going on in the whole situation there. Okay, so you have the Wailing Wall. The Wailing Wall represents the last remaining piece of the second temple, I say of Solomon. You know, the first temple was built by King David and later really by his son Solomon, right? King Solomon. And then that was destroyed. We know it was at 580, 100 AD, BC. Yeah, 587, I think, BC, by the Babylonians. It was the Babylonians, and then later, and then the Jews were taken into captivity, and then they got their freedom again, and they went back and they rebuilt the second temple in Jerusalem, which then later was destroyed relatively soon after Jesus in 72 AD. I believe somewhere right in that time frame, with Titus, under his brother who was Caesar at the time. Titus sacked Rome. If I remember my history right, it's been a while. But anyway, that said, so the last remaining piece of that temple is the Wailing Wall. And I've been to the Wailing Wall. I touched it as well. You write prayers and you put it in the cracks and you pray against the wall. And I did all that. And you'll see a bunch of Jewish, rabbis and people, doing their thing there. Now, right to the right steps of the Wailing Wall is you have a staircase to the right. Here's the Wailing Wall is a staircase to the right side. I might be backwards in video, but anyway, you go up that staircase and that's the Temple Mount. And on almost just ahead, you have, or over to the side a little bit, you've got the Dome of the Rock. And then to the right, you've got the Great Muslim Mosque. I forget the exact name they call it, but when I was there, they just called it the Great Mosque. But there's a more like appropriate name for it that they use. But anyway, I was able to go in the Muslims allowed me in the Great Mosque, and I'm appreciative of that. They allowed me in the Dome of the Rock. I am appreciative of that. I got to put my hands on the rock in the Dome of the Rock. That was awesome. It looks like a giant meteor. It's cratered. It's very large. It looks like a giant meteorite. Anyway, the Muslims, the Palestinians control the Temple Mount. They control the Dome of the Rock, and they control the Great Mosque there. Now, the Israelites, Jews, will not go up to the Temple Mount. They won't go up the steps because they believe somewhere up there is where the Ark of the Covenant was stored, and that's their holy of holies. And they think you'd be desecrating the ground to step where it once stood out of honor or whatever. So they don't go up there. But so now you've got these Palestinians that control the Temple Mount. And this goes back all the way to the Crusades. I mean, this goes back centuries of war, all right, between different groups and the Christians trying to control the Christians lost control of Jerusalem and to the Persians, and this has been going on for for centuries, all right, and like I said, the whole Crusades and all that kind of stuff. So the only way to remove the Palestinians to build their third temple, the only way the Israelites can build their third temple on that site. Now, there has been talk about them building the third temple at a different site. However, many believe they want to rebuild on the exact site of the temple, and they know it was there. So there's a big push for building on that site. The problem is you got to get rid of the Palestinians that control the Temple Mount. And those Palestinians aren't going to give up the Dome of the Rock and the Great Mosque without going to all out war. And I mean all out war. So it's very coincidental to me. We know that governments, and especially our own, have a history of false flag events where we attack ourselves and blame it on our enemies so that we can push our own agenda. Don't even get me started on 9/11, all right, which was, I don't care what anybody says. I've studied it more than anyone else I've ever met. And it was 100% an inside job. And if you don't know that, then you're just ignorant of all the facts. That's just a fact. That was done by an agenda, and it was completely. You could hand me a mic right now. I could go on for 2 weeks on physical evidence from what took place. And from the 9/11 Commission report that was made up of NIST and FEMA, how it doesn't even make common sense, how you got all these engineers that came out against it. I've got video, I've got DVD where they've got evidence of charges and bombs being placed on the support beams, physical evidence. I could go on and on and on, and it's unrefutable information. And I studied it. I studied it on my own, did my own investigation. And I studied it the way I was trained to do investigations, which was you don't listen to anybody, you follow the physical evidence. The physical evidence always tells the truth. And then after you've completed that investigation, you go back and listen to what witnesses say. And if they say something that's close to what you already know from the physical evidence, then you know that they're probably telling the truth. If they say something that defies the laws of physics, then you know they're full of crap. That's how it works, you know. When I was a state trooper, when I rolled up on a vehicle collision, whether it was a fatality or just a fender bender, I can look at the direction of the crush damage. I can look at the marks on the road. I can look at the crush pattern on the vehicle, and in my mind, I can replay pretty much 80 to almost 90% of what took place just from seeing the physical evidence. Then once I know what happened, then I go talk to the people and see what they say. If they tell me something again that doesn't meet the laws of physics and doesn't match what I see with the evidence, then I know they're not telling me the truth. And it's the same exact thing when you study other things like 9/11. But anyway, moving on. I don't want to get hung up on that point. I believe it's very possible that I hear people talking outside my house. That's not cool. No one should be on my property, which they're probably not, but keep it close by. Might be a neighbor or something. Anyway, that said, Get my trusty weapon ready. um, I believe it's highly likely that uh, that Israel used the attack um, as a means to have an excuse in order to basically get rid of all the Palestinians so that they could basically recover the Temple Mount. I think ultimately that was the goal, one way or another. I think that was the goal. And by the way, I mean, we create our own enemies. You ever heard of Al Qaeda? Yeah, that's Western intelligence agency. You ever heard of ISIS? Yeah, that's Western intelligence agency. Why do you think that ISIS disappeared after Obama left office? Because their boss is gone, and McCain died, who was bringing them bags of money. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. So, like the history of the U.S., we create all our own enemies. I mean, Noriega, all right, Osama bin Laden, all right. Go down the list. Saddam Hussein. These are all people we created. These are all people we put in power. These are all people we trained, that we funded, that we trained their people. We funded them. We armed them. They all work for us until one day we're like, oh, now you're the bad guy. Really? I mean, come on. And then ISIS disappears. And I was listening to Syrian Girl recently, who's fantastic, by the way, and I encourage people to go listen to her channel. Syrian Girl said, why is it ISIS always attacks the enemies of the U.S., like Russia, right? Like the whole mall shooting. They're like, oh, it was ISIS is taking responsibility for it, which, they haven't been around in like forever, and since Obama, and now all of a sudden they're back into it, and they're attacking our enemies, the enemies of the U.S. Very strange, very weird on that one. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, we create our own enemies. I trained at Fort Benning, Georgia. At Fort Benning, Georgia, you have the School of the Americas. You know what they train at the School of the Americas? All our enemies. That's what they train at the School of Americas. That's what they do. They professionally train them, and they teach them how to play soldier. And we do it for the drug cartels too. I did the interview with Sancho. The drug cartels will knowingly send their people through our military for training, and some of that would be like special forces training, like. Not only that, but like with high tech equipment. It's no joke. That's only because our intelligence is running all that. You want to talk about drugs in our country? Yeah, that's us. That's our own government doing it. You want to talk about child trafficking in our country? Yeah, that's us. That's our own government doing it. All of that. All of that. It's all, like I said, what I say when we started this, war is deception. And if you think you know who the players are on the battlefield, you don't. If you think you understand what's going on in the world because you watch Fox News or CNN, you don't. You don't. Yeah, in fact, that would be the worst. I tell people, do not watch that trash. The only way you're going to find any real journalism without being trained in intelligence is go listen to independent journalists. And here's another thing I'll tell you from training on intelligence training. Now, you've got to listen to every side. You need to go listen to what Putin says. You need to listen to what Israel says. You need to listen to what Al Jazeera says. You see what I'm saying? You can't ever just listen to one-sided news. You can't ever just listen to your own country and think you understand the truth of what's going on. You're not. You're not. And that doesn't mean you don't love your country or that you're not patriotic. But you cannot get all your news from one source. It doesn't work that way. And I would say stop listening to mainstream news. Go listen to independent journalists that have proven themselves, that have a track record. All right. That's like these donks in Congress. If you want to know if they're worth a hill of beans, go look at what their voting history is. That tells you everything you need to know about that person. Just that. So same thing. Go to independent journalists. Go to these independent news sources. So anyway, that's Gaza. U.S. Congressman calls for Hiroshima and Nagasaki solution in Gaza and Ukraine. RT. What? Reuters. What? These people are so delusional that we've got U.S. congressmen calling for us to drop nuclear bombs on these people in that country. It's genocide. And like I said, I don't care for Muslims, but I don't believe in genociding them either. I believe that all human life has value. That's like the whole Black Lives Matter thing. No, it's not Black Lives Matter. It's all lives matter. And anyone who's got a problem with that statement is a damn effing racist. All lives matter. You got to stop seeing color and even race as far as worth of a human being. Like Malcolm X said, you judge someone on the quality of their character. Man, if I come across somebody that's acting like some street hood, I don't care what color they are, I'm not going to take this person seriously. Now, if somebody holds themselves with a degree of character, then I'm going to take them completely serious. All right? There's a difference. And they even told us in police academies, oh, you can't just judge someone by the way that someone's dressed. Bull crap, you can't. The way you present yourself is explaining your character and your value system. In fact, so much so that when you join the FBI, they do this little process where they give you a random picture, okay, and of like some businessman holding a briefcase, no emotion on his face. And you have to go home and write an essay, a report that says every single thing you can know about this person just from that photograph. All right. That's what the FBI does. You know what that is? That's judging that person based on the qualities of the way they're presenting themselves. That's all you have to go on. Their face is completely emotionless. So it's not giving you any reading on that. You've got to go off of are they groomed? How's their clothing? What does it look like it comes from? What part of the country? What style would this fit in? What education level would this person possibly have? What's a monetary value that they possibly have? Where would they possibly live? I mean, these are all the things you've got to come up with on the report. That's what they train in the FBI. Yet in lower police academies, they're like, oh, you can't judge anything about a person because of them dressing as a hood. Wrong. That's completely wrong. That's good. And it's the opposite of what the FBI teaches. You can absolutely make some. Now, does that mean you're going to know everything about that person? No, not at all. But as a general rule, you can learn a lot by the way people present themselves and the way they choose to present themselves. As a trooper, man, if I dealt with a kid that looked like some hood, and again, I'm not talking about any particular race. You have just many white people out there that just are some nasty little trash bangers. You know what I mean? For like gangbanger kind of thing. Whether they're in a gang or not, it's just the way they present themselves, and they come off with a bunch of attitude. And why you pull me over? Like they're already assuming that it's you're just picking on them kind of thing. I can't see who a person is in a car before I pull them over. I don't pull you over just because of the color of your skin or because of the way you present yourself. I have no idea until I step out the car and actually see you. But the way you choose to dress and act and carry yourself does say a lot about you. Does say a lot about you, and you have a large choice in how that goes. But anyway, getting back to topic. I've never been accused of going off topic before, but this is insanity levels. Again, I was trying to make a case that look at who the aggressors are for trying to start nuclear World War III. All right, because it's not the ones who are accusing Russia. It's the ones. I mean, it's not the ones. It's not Russia that they're actually accusing Russia of escalating, but yet all these other conflicts, they're wanting to escalate. And you have a U.S. congressman calls for dropping nukes in Gaza. That's like, this person doesn't even belong in Congress if they think that way, because that's not a realistic approach to dealing with a race of people or nation, whether you agree with them or not. You know, uh, the majority escalation in Israel strikes Iran embassy in Syria. Okay, so again, this is an escalation. Who is escalating? All right. U.S. intelligence is convinced major Iranian response against Israel is imminent. Okay, oh, well, that's to be expected. If you're genociding their people and you're doing a land grab, which that's what this is, a land grab of the Temple Mount, especially, plus other areas, then yeah, there's going to be a response. Like I said, Iran will go to all-out war. Iran's Muslim, Saudi Arabia is Muslim. They will go to all-out war over this. Joe Rogan responds to Israel's a robot genocide. So go check that out. Israel announces major land grab in West Bank. Oh, wow. Holy cow. What was I just talking about? This is about a land grab. That's what it's about. You remember Maui, right? Some of the most expensive real estate in the world. These people refuse to sell. All of a sudden, we just happen to have a catastrophe that wipes you all out. And now the government is doing a land grab. We're not going to give that back to you. We're not going to pay off your family. We're just going to steal the land and build our own hotels for the super rich in our new 15-minute cities that we just had a conference for right before this went down and took place here. I'm sure that's not a coincidence at all, right? I'm sure our government's not that evil, right? And what happens there yesterday will happen to us tomorrow. So this is a land grab. Just like Maui was a land grab. It was a satanic, evil, unhuman land grab. By the way, parts of the same thing went on in Canada and other countries as well. Same energy weapons as well, by the way. We'll deal with that more in a later time. The Guardian, at least 115 killed and scores wounded in Moscow concert hall attack. Okay. Now, again, that's a major provocation, a terrorist attack against Russia. Who do you think is behind that? Well, Putin has said that they caught, I think, 11 of the people that were there, some degree of that, trying to sneak back across the Ukrainian border. They were ready for them. They've tortured them, gotten information from them, and now they claim they believe it's from Western intelligence. That means the U.S., that means in conjunction with MI6 in England, and probably in conjunction with the UN. Something else important here. You can't look at the modern conflict in the Ukraine and understand completely what's going on here. See, back in 2014, I know this because we had special forces units that were over there in 2014 that were assisting working with the U.S. and the UN. What happened in the Ukraine then is the U.S., Ukraine's not even like an independent country. It's not. The U.S. formed a coup in the Ukraine in 2014. We removed their leadership and we put Zelensky in power as our little puppet. That's what it is. So it's just a vassal of the U.S., and the U.S. has been using it as a proxy to stage war against Russia. Why do you think the U.S. is spending so much, just insanely absurd money in the Ukraine? Because we're funding the war because it's our war. It's our war. Imagine if Russia came here, took Canada, and said, we're now taking over Canada and going to use this to attack the U.S. Oh, and if that's not bad enough, I'm sure we wouldn't stand for that. We would go to war. It only makes sense. And if that's not bad enough, oh, by the way, we're building bioweapons labs here that we're going to use against your people. Really? Don't think any country would stand for that. And Russia has every right to defend itself, despite what Fox News and CNN has to say. And oh, by the way, Fox News is not conservative news for anyone out there. I hate to break your bubble if you believe that. It used to be and started as a conservative news media. However, Rupert Murdoch was forced out of office because they remember the whole Me Too movement. They accused him of inappropriately hugging a woman, a staffer, 20 years prior. 20 years. And so they used that in a court to boot him out as the owner of the company. So his family, who are younger generations of, how do you say this? Globalist retards, and I can only use that term because I'm part retarded. Don't make fun of me for my disabilitas or be upset because I say the word retard. So you have these younger, more kind of progressive globalist kids. They take over the company and they're running it and own it now. And it's made a huge shift where it's not conservative news anymore. It's not. They pretend, oh, we're fair and balanced. 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 You know what that is? That's called neuro linguistic programming. It's called psychologically programming your brain. All right. You hear that enough, it passes your filters and your brain starts to believe it. You start to believe, oh, this is a fair, this news is fair and balanced. Yeah, of course it is. Yeah, it's a psychological trick that they use on you when you hear them say that crap all the time. So it's a psychological manipulation. In the news, it's not conservative. They pretend to be conservative, but they're really not, and they're part of the whole agenda system right now, which is very wrong and very evil. And again, they're just reading off a teleprompter from some editor and whoever's paying the most, which a lot of times, drug companies, big pharma. You know what I'm saying? Hello, wake up. And by the way, you ever want to be healthy? Stay away from all that crap. The Greek word for pharmacy is pharmakia, means sorcery in ancient Greek. Pharmakia means sorcery. The Bible says what? Stay away and avoid sorcery. Stay away from their medications. They're poison. They're poison. All right. I would argue to be healthy, stay away from being dependent on medications. A lot of times, my family are doctors, and my stepfather was a Nobel Prize nominated virologist. And I can tell you, and you can ask any doctor this. Don't just take my opinion. Ask any doctor this. They used to have to take the Hippocratic Oath, which means do no harm, or as a doctor. All right. I don't know if they still do that. You have to ask them. But you ask any doctor this, one of the first things that they teach in medical school, and when you start to, and by the way, I have been through EMT school as well as coming from a family of doctors, so I do know a bit about of health and stuff from that standpoint, um, and qualified in some of those areas. But um, that said, so I have had a little bit of professional training, not a doctor or anything. But anyway, the idea is they always used to teach in medicine that you don't want to target the symptom, you want to target the cause. And I think in a general way today, we're focusing too much on symptoms than causes. We need to get to root causes of what injures health. And today it just seems like everything is pop a pill to be happy. I mean, that's not how God designed us. We weren't designed that we have to be, loaded up on just legal versions of drugs just to function properly. That's not how we were designed. And a lot of times people I know, it's it's not made them better. If it's possibly worse over time, but it doesn't make them better. So I really think it's important that we try to stay away from artificial things and try to eat healthier. I'm not advocating you got to be some kind of like health nut or freak or anything like that, but there are a lot of medications were just invented from natural things in nature, like aspirin. Aspirin comes from a willow tree. If you go to this time and cut off a piece of bark of most of the strands of willow tree, the different species, and you chew on that, it tastes exactly like aspirin because that's what it is. But anyway, I won't go too deep on that kind of stuff, but just covering the highlights and generalities. I'm not a medical doctor, blah 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 blah. Those are just my opinions. But there are also opinions that most doctors will tell you is exactly the case. Um, so land grab. All right, moving on. Um, okay, the Moscow attack, right? And let me see. I think I got a Well, no, I'll swing back to that. Um, so the Moscow attack, Putin is saying now that after he has evidence to suggest that it's U.S. and Western sources that were ultimately behind the attack, and that does not surprise me at all. Because again, look at the escalation. Look who's escalating. All right, look at this flashback. State Department's Victoria Nuland warns Russia will receive nasty surprises. Why would you even say that kind of thing before these events happen? Because if tell someone I'm going to go rob a bank and that bank gets robbed, who should everyone come to and take as a suspect first? The person that opened their mouth saying stupid stuff like this woman did. Really, you're going to say that, and then there's going to be an attack? What are you supposed to think after that point? I mean, come on, this is common sense. U.S. intelligence says it knew ISIS was planning a terror attack in Moscow. Well, hell yeah, they knew, because they created ISIS. I'm telling you, they created it. They control it. And we haven't heard from them since Obama until now. Really? That's not a coincidence. So, of course, they knew. Ukrainian drone hits Russia's third biggest refinery. All right, damage not critical. Now, that said, again, what is this? This is an escalation. You keep poking the bear. You keep poking the bear. You keep poking the bear. All right, Russia wants de-escalation, but no one's coming to the table. The spy war. How the CIA secretly helps Ukraine fight Putin. Yeah, because it's their mission from the start. They created this plan, and now they are running this plan. That's what this is all about. In fact, I will reference one of my favorite people at this point. Let me see if I've got that. Yeah, I got to pull it up my phone so I can. The print's so small I can't read it. I'm going to pull up one of my favorite people here because it fits into this perfectly as to what I'm trying to describe. Because I just named that intelligence agency, and how I said that that intelligence agency is behind creating this situation that we're seeing right now. So I'm going to put this up, and it says this from our boy JFK. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy. Wait, hold on a second. Hold on a second. Now he had to throw out that word conspiracy theorist, and we all know you got to put up a wall anytime someone says that and ignore any truth that they have to say. Right? We can't listen to conspiracy theorists. Right? That's not what I wanted. So this is. What is the definition of a conspiracy theorist? Well, it's a person that researches a subject and then uses logic and critical thinking skills to form an educated opinion instead of just blindly believing whatever they saw on TV. That's why it's so dangerous to be a conspiracy theorist. You're not just someone gullible that just takes everything that you're told. You know what I mean? You actually research. And by the way, people don't realize the term conspiracy theory wasn't used, it's been weaponized as a self censoring tool, all right? And very effectively, I might add. But it was created by the CIA in the JF Kennedy assassination. When JF Kennedy was assassinated during the Warren Commission, if people started asking public questions about things that didn't add up or coincidences that shouldn't be there, the government, the CIA, came out with this whole concept of conspiracy theory. And the whole idea was to shut people up and have people self censor and not take people seriously by making fun of people who actually ask questions, people who actually try to research. All right. Um, People are like, hey, this doesn't add up when you research this. You know, why doesn't A, B, or C is doesn't fit the official story? Hey, you need to shut up, sir, and you need to be silenced and get out of here. All right. So back to our boy. If I can find it here real quickly, which of course I cannot. Back to here it is. Okay. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic, that means big, ruthless, means they'll go to any lengths possible, conspiracy, that means a collaboration of people who are working in secret to destroy, that realizes primarily on covert, that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections. That sounds familiar. On intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It's a system which has conscripted a vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines U.S. military, the diplomatic and intelligence agencies, economic, science, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, that means killed, not praised. No expenditure is questioned. No rumor is printed. No secret is revealed. Now, he gave this speech just before he was killed. And I say this, is that a coincidence? No. There's a story that JFK was brought into a room and was handled hard by some politicians, and he came out with tears just running down his face. Now, this is pure speculation on my part, but my intuition, which is very strong, tells me this. They sat him down and said, look, it's not a coincidence that a junior congressman all of a sudden hit the highlight and is now made the president of the country. All right. That we put you in office because we knew you were compromised, because you were a part of prohibition and working with the mob, and you got a problem with alcohol and women. We like those people because they can be controlled, so they thought. So they gave this little speech to JFK and said, don't think you're actually the president. You're just a puppet. We're the ones that put you in office, and if you don't play ball, we can remove you out of office. So JFK had to have a real come to Jesus moment, a real heart to heart. And he had to decide at that moment if he was actually going to be a real president, even though it would probably cost his life, or if he was going to be the puppet on the string and go along to get along, as most people in the world today just seem so happy to do, and so regular to do. You know what I'm saying? Well, he decided to be a real man and a real Christian. And he decided to stand for his values and die for them. And so he gave us this warning before his death to try to explain to us that there was a coup that was trying to take over our government from the inside. And that is what we are dealing with today. I claim that they controlled the office of the president from that point on until Reagan was able to beat their system and get into office simply because of his popularity as a former actor. All right. Reagan was a good man and he was a good president. I'm not saying he was perfect. I don't say anyone's perfect. I'm certainly not. But what happened is Reagan got shot, and more than likely he was shot by that intelligence agency. And many will tell you that from that point on in office, Reagan didn't do anything. He was just a yes man, and Bush handled everything as a former head of that agency, which lied about being present on the day of the JFK assassination, but photographs put him there on the scene. So, you take that for how you want. But anyway, moving on. So yeah, you have this, waste of space and breathing on Earth, and going back through some of these. Yeah. Okay. So we talked about this agency and how they openly admit here how they're using the Ukraine as a proxy to basically start war with Russia. And that's what we're doing. Now, Putin made a statement. And by the way, this was many years ago. This is not a recent statement, but He said about 95% of the world's terrorist acts are made by that intelligence agency. All right. And that's absolutely the truth. There's no other way to cut it. We even create our own enemies. We create terror. It's not to say there's not real enemies and real terror out there, but all the major stuff we've created for ourselves and we control when it serves us one way or another. We turn against our friends and our enemies when it suits us, but we create this. All right. Now, here's someone from that agency. You can look up this name, but he was a head of that agency, I believe, at one time. And he says this: no matter how paranoid or conspiracy minded. Oh, wait, you mean they use the term conspiracy as though it's a legitimate thing? Look at that. Or conspiracy minded you are, what the government is actually doing is worse than you can even imagine. That's out of the horse's mouth right there. And what he's saying is, all the stuff you've heard, they're a lot more evil than that. And their purpose is a lot more evil than that. And what their plans are for the destruction of our country, I think that's summed up in that. How they're creating the globalist government and all telling us everything's good and happy. And you just need to sell your soul and, compromise all your values so that we can all get along. And so you can accept all these one-sided trade deals. Oh, and all one-sided laws like hate crimes that only works if someone of a person of color is injured. But if it's you and they're sitting there screaming, "Die, white person! We hate white people," it's not a hate crime because the law only goes one way. Really, really, really. There was just a news report of kids that were picking on a kid at school. Think like in Arizona or somewhere like that, and one kid went to defend this kid that these black kids were beating on him, calling him, or I don't know, it's black, Mexican, something. They were picking on him because he was white, and because schools now teach kids that if you're white, you're bad, and all your family line and history is bad and it's evil, and you need to bow down and do repentance for being white, which is that's just trash, and that's just a lie, and it's a cop out. And they should schools shouldn't be teaching this, but because the schools are teaching hate in the name of non-hate, they're actually teaching hate, right? Imagine that. In the name of ending racism, they're actually creating racism. So these kids were beating on this little kid that couldn't defend himself against a number of other kids. Another older kid stepped in to defend this kid, and they then started beating on that kid, ganged up on him, and they beat him to death. They killed him in high school or junior high or one of those, just because of his race and color. Were they charging those kids? I don't know if something's happened since. I do think they charge the kids, but I don't believe it's the whole hate crime thing. Because like I said, that's, and I could be wrong on that, but generally that's only one-sided. Many of our laws today are one-sided. For example, look at all these frivolous lawsuits where they're attacking Alex Jones, where they're attacking Trump now, where they attack January 6 people. That's all one-sided law things. That doesn't work if you're on the liberal side. You can get away with murder and do whatever you want. But if you're on the conservative side, now we're using the courtrooms as a weaponized judicial system that's one-sided. And that's not freedom. That's not justice, and that's an abuse of our system. That's an abuse of our country and should be stopped. All right. Now, this is Cicero that served under Julius Caesar in Rome. And he says that a republic can survive its fools and even its ambitions, but it cannot survive treason from within. He's saying it can't survive traitors. For traitors appears not a traitor. He speech in accents familiar to his victims, and he appeals to the baseness that it's really hard for me to read these things, and it's small on my end. I got to look it up on my phone. But anyway, the gist of it is a republic can withstand any enemy at the gate, but it cannot survive traitors from within. And that's what I'm saying is the problem with our country right now. This is from Nathan Rothschild, and this is a quote a lot of people have heard from. I care not what puppet sits Well, puppet is placed upon the throne of England to rule the empire on which the sun never sets. The man who controls Britain's money supply controls the British Empire, and I control the money supply. So that goes to show you that's just a lesson. It's the same thing happens in our country. You got the haves and have-nots, even without socialism and communism. And if you're not in the club, which is usually a cult ritual, Freemasons and occult ritual, uh, then then you're not a part of the club. And these people that control the money, they get away with whatever they want. You know, look at the banker bailouts. Really, too big to fail? Really, our country would have been a lot better off if it did fail. Here's another one. This is from Paul Wahlberg. We will have a government. We will have a world government, as in one world government, whether you like it or not. The only question is whether that government will be achieved by conquest or consent. So, if you listen to these globalists, they're not shy about talking about their one world government and what their goal is to do. All right, this is David Rockefeller. All we need is the right major crisis, and the nations will accept the New World Order. The New World Order, it's hard to believe. I still have friends that deny the fact that these globalists are trying to create a one world government and a New World Order. Dude, these people openly talk about it. You know, check this out. Whatever the price of the Chinese Revolution, it has obviously succeeded not only in producing more efficient and uh, dedicated administration, but also in fostering high moral, high moral, and community of purpose. The social experiment in China under Chairman Mao's leadership is one of the most important and successful human and successful in human history. David Rockefeller. Now, let me break that down for you. The globalists created modern China to be a beta test for what their intention was to enslave and control the rest of the world. And right now, modern China is a nightmare of a social credit system where everything you do, you're shunned if you violate the social credit scores and all that kind of stuff. And you can't get jobs, you can't travel, you're shunned by your family and friends. I mean, it's a nightmare. And it's all a system of control. It's absolute slavery. It's just one gigantic prison. It's just absolute slavery. But it was the modern globalists that put Mao Zedong in power. And here's a funny little trick. You ask Americans who's the most evil person in history. 9 times out of 10, they're going to say, "Oh, Hitler, 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 Hitler." Wrong. Mao Zedong killed just about 1 billion people, and it was his own people. He couldn't like blame it on Jews or them damn Christians and things like that. It was his own people, and it was to do their what they call not the Great Reset, but their Great Plan. Okay, same thing, different words. And they moved all people out of wilderness areas and farms and forced everyone into major metropolitan cities where you can be tracked and controlled and monitored in everything that you do. Hence the social the credit system, you know, which and again, all of that is just training, a beta test to make sure that they get it right when they do it to the rest of the world because they're going to create they're going to destroy everything in a nuclear war. That's coming. Hold your breath. Pray to God for more time, but don't pray to God to stop it because he's not. It's his will. It's going to happen. Mother Teresa won a Nobel Prize, and I study a lot of things that she said and wrote, and it impacts me very strongly, very heavily. She was an amazing person. I've worked with her nuns, her sisters, and they've out of many religious communities I've worked with, they seem to be a much better one from a lot of times. Mother Teresa won a Nobel Prize, and she gave her acceptance speech with Bill and Hillary Clinton mocking her in the front row, and she said, "The fruit of abortion is nuclear war." That was not a warning. That was a biblical prophecy. The fruit of abortion is nuclear war. God told me years ago he's going to destroy the United States, and he said it'll happen in a single day. Single day. He says he's going to destroy the United States because of the sin of abortion above any other offense against him. And there's many, many offenses against him. Like the whole pride thing. Hey, pride is one of the 7 deadly sins. Pride begets the fall, right? These are not loving people. These are people that you must conform to their demands at any cost. And you can't have your own opinion and be against it. That's evil. And that goes against freedom. It's the loss of freedom. It's demonic. It's demonic possession is what it ultimately is. And you're seeing more and more demonic possession ruling our world today. And it's very bad because it's going to end very badly. But there's going to be a nuclear war. God's going to destroy the U.S. with a nuclear war. And you can see that things are aligning right now around the world and countries to facilitate this, to make this happen. See, a lot of these countries, I listened one time to Benjamin Netanyahu give a speech, and he was talking about Iran. And then I listened to the leader of Iran give a speech right after that, and it was crazy. Benjamin Netanyahu said, I heard him say, he said, we believe that if we attack Iran with a kind of almost like a nuclear strike kind of thing, it'll bring about the era and time of our Messiah that we're waiting for as a Jewish nation. Then when I listened to the head of Iran, he said, we believe that if we attack Israel, that it'll bring about the 13th Imam, who's basically that version, their Messiah. So only the devil creates a situation where, yeah, if we try to obliterate you and you try to obliterate us, it brings about what we both want, which is our Messiah, who only comes through the destruction of war and death. Really? Like, that just doesn't make sense to me. But the globalists want to create a one world government. And in order to do that, they've got to destroy the existing systems, and they got to point the finger at Russia and blame Christians and religion, and so that they can come up with a new system that outlaws freedom and religion and Christianity. All right, let's look at some more of what these demon worshippers say. Depopulation should be the highest priority of foreign policy. Well, imagine that. How can we cause depopulation? Well, certainly through supply chains, but it sounds like nuclear war would also fit the bill, with other things I won't even mention. Control oil, you control nations. Control food, and you control the people. So that brings up the case. Why is Bill Gates and other billionaires buying up all of our farmland? Why is China buying up our farmland? It's not for a good end, I promise you that, especially when they're all saying we got to get rid of cows and meat. Really? Oh, you got to eat the bugs, right? Not good. Hungary Prime Minister says George Soros seeks a Muslim Europe. So they used the never-ending war in the Middle East as an excuse from 9/11 to then displace all these people and flood the West with all these immigrants, many of which are Muslims. Right? A newly revealed vision from Pope John Paul II: Islam will invade Europe, and we see this taking place right now. It's happening right now, and you're not going to hear about a lot of that in the news. But what's going on in other countries is just a nightmare dystopia. Some demographics have been changed forever, where these Muslims have taken over, and they're like Sweden. Sweden's pretty much destroyed. You're not going to have much of a Sweden anymore because the demographics have all been changed. They're trying to do that in other countries. If you go to the UN's website, as I talk about, you pull up weaponized migration. I mean, not weaponized. You look up replacement migration. There's actually a page on the UN that talks about replacement migration. Now, I call that weaponized replacement migration. And we see this going on in the southern border. Just this last week or two, there was a federal judge that said that an illegal alien can own a gun, but yet they're trying to do anything they can to remove guns from citizens, like the new red flag laws that especially the ones that New York just passed. And then all of a sudden, they're talking in the news today about a death of some old man who wasn't hurting and he wasn't harming anyone. They go up at his door and say, "You got to give us your gun. We're taking your guns from you." And then he tried to go for his gun because he wasn't giving it up, and they shot and killed him. Crazy. Ronald Reagan, who was a good president till he was shot, said, "A nation that cannot control its borders is not a nation." And that is 100% true. By the way, you try to go to some of these other countries like Mexico as an illegal in their country, and you go to prison. It's not like, oh, we're going to give you credit cards, we're going to give you phones, we're going to give you health care, we're going to put you up in housing. No, why our own people are in tent cities in the streets and veterans. You know what I'm saying? F the veterans. They're done. We don't need them anymore. They did their purpose. We use those. We use them. Oh, speaking of, here's another way of F the veterans. Are you ready for this from the same little maggot meat sack? From Henry Kissinger, military men are just dumb, stupid animals to be used as pawns in foreign policy. Huh. And you wonder why there's such a shortage of soldiers wanting to sign up for the military today. In fact, this last week, they said they're trying to pull people out of retirement because they don't have enough soldiers to fill the ranks. Yet our own leaders, many won't say it, but at least this guy had the courage to say the truth, even though he's a worm meat sack that's not worth living. Military men are just dumb, stupid animals to be used as pawns in foreign policy. That's bad. That's real bad. Okay, it's a characteristic of any decaying civilization that the great masses of the people are unaware of the tragedy. Humanity in a crisis is generally insensitive to the gravity of the times in which it lives. Men do not want to believe that their own times are wicked, partly because they have no standard outside of themselves by which to measure their lives, their time. If there is no fixed concept of justice, how shall men know if it's violated? Only those who live by faith really know what is happening in the world. The great masses without faith are unconscious of the destructive process going on because they've lost the vision of the heights from which they have fallen. Lost the vision of heights from which they have fallen. I thought that was a great description of how evil is in our world today. And a lot of times it's like the pot boiling in the frog boiling in the pot. Because we slowly are conditioned by this so long, we tend to stay in the pot until we just cook ourselves to death. And that's what we're at in our country right now. And that's why the enemy is so smart. They do things incrementally over time. They don't do it too fast. There were some that said that Hitler was doing what they wanted, but he was trying to do it too fast. And they knew they had to do it incrementally to get to the point where we are today. This is a great statement. Hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times. Good times create weak men. Weak men create hard times. Man, if that doesn't sum it all up. All right. Here's one of the biggest things. Now, last time I did this, I literally got death threats, but they can kiss my ass. This is one of the biggest problems with our world today. JF Kennedy was killed by intelligence agencies that were in bed with occult organizations. Here's one of the biggest occult organizations in the world, and it is absolutely evil and it is absolutely satanic. And anyone that believes otherwise is just in error and wrong. And if you happen to be a Mason and you think that they're good people, yeah, it's not a bad little social club on the bottom level, but they don't know what they're involved in. And the higher ups, this is completely Luciferian and satanic. And they are part of the takeover of government and takeover of churches and the Catholic Church. And they are takeover of and they're the creation of the coming, what do you call it? Antichrist, right? So right here, this is from a book called Morals and Dogma. Now, some Masons want to argue with me that it's not in there. Wrong. You got to go get an older version of the book because they took it out in modern versions. You got to get an older version of the book, Dogma, Morals and Dogma, by Albert Pike, who's like a god of Freemasonry. And he has this statement in there where he says that Lucifer is their god. Now, Masons get real angry when you talk about this publicly. I got death threats last time I did, but they can kiss my ass as far as I'm concerned. Here's something you got to understand. This is what I told them when they called and gave me death threats. I'm a servant of Jesus Christ. And that means that I don't die and nothing can happen to me unless Jesus Christ wills that to happen. All right. So I don't care about them and I don't have fear of them because I only fear Jesus and nothing else. And they can't do anything to me that Jesus doesn't allow. And if Jesus allows it, then praise God. Jesus died on a cross. Someday I will die that way too, in a similar fashion. I get my head cut off in a public execution for preaching about Jesus. But you know what? Praise God. I think that's awesome. My take is if Jesus died for me, then my only way is to die for him. And if he did that to help other people, then my way is to try to help other people. And that's how I look at it. So so I don't fear evil. I don't fear what evil does or their threats. I only fear not pleasing God. I tell everyone that high level masonry worships Lucifer, and he's like, but people don't believe me. And he's like, and I'm at the head of the level. Again, Albert Pike. To serve sovereign instructions of the grade 33. And by the way, I'm not a Mason. I have not taken their oaths, or I'm not bound by their oaths. So I can report on this, and they can suck it. We tell you that you have to repeat to the brothers of inferior grades that we worship only one God, to whom we pray without superstition. It is we, the initiated in the supreme grade, that are to keep the real Masonic religion, persevering purely the Luciferian doctrine. Albert Pike. Now let's check this out. This is important because he names the world wars. I'm gonna try and see if I can pick this up. Here he says, now what's crazy about this is from a very long time ago, but they name all the world wars. They said there would be 3 world wars. The First World War must be brought about in order to permit the Illuminati to overthrow the power of the Caesar, Tsar in Russia, and of making that country a fortress of atheistic communism. The disgrace caused by the agents of the Illuminati between the British and the Germanic empires will be used to ferment this war. At the end of the war, communism will be built and used in order to destroy other governments and in order to weaken the religions. That was how they described World War I before it took place. World War II must be fermented by the taking advantage of the differences between the fascist and the political Zionists. The war must be brought about so that Nazism is destroyed and that the political Zionists may be strong enough to institute a sovereign state of Israel in Palestine. During the Second World War, international communism must become strong enough in order to balance Christendom, which would be then restrained and held in check until the time when we would need it for the final social cataclysm. All right. After this Second World War, communism was made strong enough to begin taking over weaker governments. In 1945, the Potsdam Conference between Truman, Churchill, and Stalin, a large portion of Europe was simply handed over to Russia, And on the other side of the world, the aftermath of the war with Japan helped to sweep the tide of communism into China. Now, he says the Third World War must be fermented by taking advantage of the differences caused by the agentor of the Illuminati agent between the political Zionists and the leaders of the Islamic world. The war must be conducted in such a way that Islam, the modern Arabic world, and political Zionism, the state of Israel, mutually destroy each other. What were we just talking about? What did Benjamin Netanyahu say? They had to destroy the Islamic side. The Islamic leader said they had to destroy the Israeli side. Imagine that. Meanwhile, the other nations, once more divided on the issue, will be constrained to fight to the point of complete physical, moral, spiritual, and emotional exhaustion. Look at the United States. We've been in nonstop war for the last 20, 30 years. And as soon as we end the war in the Middle East that no one in the U.S. wanted as far as the American people, they just start another one in the Ukraine. And then now we got this kicking off in Israel. All right. So, yeah, completely physical, moral, spiritually, economically exhausted. Yeah, we're there. We shall unleash the nihilists and the atheists, and we shall provoke a formidable social cataclysm, which in all its horror will show clearly to the nations the effect of absolute atheism, origin of savagery, and of the most bloody turmoil. Yeah, that's the war they're talking about coming. Then everywhere the citizens obliged to defend themselves against the world minority of revolutionaries will exterminate those destroyers of civilization and the multitude disillusioned with Christianity, whose aesthetic spirits will form that moment be without compass or direction. Yeah, I'd say the large part of Christianity right now is without compass or direction because it's been infiltrated by these groups and Satan. Anxious for ideal, but without knowing where to render its adoration. It will receive the true light through the universal manifestation of the pure doctrine of Lucifer. That's the new common religion of the new one world government, where you will be forced to take the mark of the beast and worship an idol. Brought finally out to public view. Oh, you heard that? Brought finally out to public view. That means behind closed doors, they're already worshiping this thing. They just are waiting to bring it out to the public and say, you have to too. The manifestation, that's slavery. The manifestation will result in the general reactionary movement, which will follow the destruction of Christianity and atheism, both conquering and exterminating at the same time. That's some heavy, scary stuff right there. That is some heavy, scary stuff right there. Yeah, they're bringing about the Antichrist, by the way. Later on, I'll show in their own prophecies how they're bringing about the Antichrist and go into that in more detail. Ronald Reagan, if fascism ever comes to America, it will come in the name of liberalism. Yep. We're there, and we're in the fascism. Remember, when you have these corporations that are in bed with our government to accomplish the same goal against us, we're screwed. That's fascism. I show this picture of these soldiers I took on a wall at a restaurant. Look in the faces of these people. Look at the faces of these men. These are all men that volunteered their lives, left their families, their homeland, and gave their blood to fight to defend this country so that we would have the freedoms and liberty that we so take advantage of and disrespect today or take for granted. So that brings me to my last point, which is a reiteration of my first point, and then we're done. I think 2 hours I'm dealing with this stuff is pretty depressing myself. But this is important. What I started off with is saying, look Don't listen to Fox News and CNN and the other mainstream news medias and what they're saying. It's propaganda. You're going to get the wrong take. War is deception. All right, all war is deception. Look who's escalating the war. Look who is constantly attacking Russia and then blaming Russia as though they're provocating everyone else when it's the opposite. It's not the truth. Russia's the only one saying, I want de-escalation. In fact, when Tucker Carlson recently went to interview Putin, right, our government threatened to charge him with espionage. What? You mean to tell me a journalist is trying to do what a journalist is supposed to do, and our government threatens them with espionage? How does that even make sense? Remember what I told you before about intelligence. Never take one side. You have to listen to other people's sides. You got to listen to what they believe in Al Jazeera and news. You got to listen to what they believe in other news. You got to listen to what they say in Russia. You got to listen to what Putin's saying. You'll get a very different side. The reason our government threatened Tucker so much, trying to do whatever they can to dissuade him from interviewing Putin, is because they knew what I already knew because I follow this stuff for years. But they knew Putin would say, I want peace. I want to de-escalate. I want to have talks and negotiations. But nobody else will answer my phone call. No one will come to the table. And if you've got Germany saying they're getting ready for war with Russia, you got France saying they're getting ready for war with Russia, you've got Poland saying they're getting ready for war with Russia, you got NATO saying they're getting ready for war with Russia, and the US, Britain, and the UN are already there creating war with Russia as a proxy, straight out. You have all these countries aligning against Russia, and Russia's the only one saying, I want peace. I want to de-escalate. I want negotiations. But these all other countries are saying, no, we want war, even though we're blaming you for starting it, even though we're the bullies that are actually provoking it, so that they can look at themselves as the victor later. All right? But it's important we understand this. That's why the government didn't want Tucker to go there, because they didn't want these words being said.
Who blew up Nord Stream?
Nope, wrong one. We already.
I just want to make sure
This
I'm
one.
not misunderstanding what you're saying. I don't think that I am. I think you're saying you want a negotiated settlement to what's happening in Ukraine.
Right. And we made it. We prepared a huge document in Istanbul that was initialed by the head of the Ukrainian delegation. He affixed his signature to some of the provisions, not to all of it. He put his signature, and then he himself said, we were ready to sign it and the war would have been over long ago, 18 months ago. However, Prime Minister Johnson came, talked us out of it, and we missed that chance. Well, you missed it, you made a mistake. Let them get back to that, that is all. Why do we have to bother ourselves and correct somebody else's mistakes? I know one can say it is our mistake. It was us who intensified the situation and decided to put an end to the war that started in 2014 in Donbass, as I have already said, by means of weapons. Let me get back to further in history. I already told you this. We were just discussing it. Let us go back to 1991, when we were promised that NATO would not expand, to 2008, when the doors to NATO opened to the declaration of state sovereignty of Ukraine, declaring Ukraine a neutral state. Let us go back to the fact that NATO and US military bases started to appear on the territory of Ukraine, creating threats to us. Let us go back to coup d'etat in Ukraine in 2014. It is pointless though, isn't it? We may go back and forth endlessly, but they stopped negotiations. Is it a mistake? Yes. Correct it. We are ready. What else is needed?
Do you think it's too humiliating at this point for NATO to accept Russian control of what was 2 years ago Ukrainian territory?
Я же сказал.
I said let them think how to do it with dignity. There are options if there is a will.
Варианты есть. Но если желание.
Up until now, there has been the uproar and screaming about inflicting a strategic defeat on Russia on the battlefield.
Стратегического поражения России, поражения.
Now they are apparently coming to realize that it is difficult to achieve, if possible at all. In my opinion, it is impossible by definition. It is never going to happen. It seems to me that now, those who are in power in the West have come to realize this as well. If so, if the realization has set in, they have to think what to do next. We are ready for this dialogue.
Would you be willing to say, congratulations, NATO, you won, and just keep the situation where it is now?
Ну, вы знаете, это предмет переговоров.
You know, it is a subject matter for the negotiations. No one is willing to conduct, or, to put it more accurately,
Точнее сказать, хотят.
they are willing but do not know how to do it.
Я не только вижу,
I know they want
я
to.
знаю, что
It is not just I see it, but I know they do want it. But they are struggling to understand how to do it. They have driven the situation to the point where we are at. It is not us who have done that. It is our partners, opponents who have done that. Well, now let them think how to reverse the situation. We're not against it. It would be funny if it were not so sad.
Да, было бы смешно, если бы не было так грустно.
This endless mobilization in Ukraine, the hysteria, the domestic problems, sooner or later it will result in agreement.
Истерика, там, внутренние проблемы.
You know, this probably sounds strange given the current situation,
Все равно мы договоримся. И
but the relations between the two peoples will be rebuilt anyway.
в сегодняшней ситуации прозвучит.
It will take a lot of time, but they will heal.
Между народами восстановится. Потребуется много времени.
I'll give you very unusual examples.
Совсем приведу вам необычный пример.
There is a combat encounter on the battlefield. Here's a specific example. Ukrainian soldiers got encircled. This is an example from real life. Our soldiers were shouting to them, "There is no chance. Surrender yourselves. Come out and you will be alive."
Наши солдаты им кричат.
Suddenly, the Ukrainian soldiers were screaming from there in Russian, perfect Russian, saying,
Вдруг оттуда
"Russians, do not surrender."
хорошем русском
And all of them perished.
и не сдаются.
They still identify themselves as Russian.
They still identified as Russian. He goes on to say, I've listened to the talk a few times. Anyway, but I don't want to go on with that. I just wanted to cover the point really he made in the beginning, which was that he's trying to de-escalate, and they actually put forth paperwork to de-escalate. But our governments and Western governments, are, including France, Germany, Poland, NATO, they're not responding to that de-escalation. So if he's trying to de-escalate and they're all not willing to have negotiations or talks, then what does that tell you? They only want war. Even though they're blaming Russia, they're accusing Russia of starting this when they're all the ones that are being the bullies. We're being the bullies. And that's the situation that's going on right now. Anyway, I wanted to just shed some light on that. Everyone's, free to think on their own views and their own points. I just wanted to try and offer a counterbalance to what you're going to hear out there. I do have a little bit of a background with intelligence and understand this stuff, and have traveled many of these places, so I have a little bit of an understanding of this kind of stuff. So I just wanted to offer a counterbalance to what many people are hearing in the news, and offer my take on this. If that helps, that's great. If not, then find it somewhere else. Mene Tekel. Tekel. I'm not sure exactly how to spell that. This is from Daniel 5:26. This was the famous writing on the wall where God passed judgment on the town. My last episode, I did the episode on the eclipse and the red heifer that's coming, the sacrifice of the red heifer, and how that's important. and also how the eclipse is flying over what's called the 8 Ninevehs. All right. And Nineveh is when God brought judgment to Nineveh with Jonah and the whale, and they repented at first, and then they fell back to their ways, and then God destroyed the whole place, and fulfilling His promise to bring destruction. I don't believe it's a coincidence that this eclipse is going to follow over the 8 Ninevehs. It even passes over a Jonah and rapture as well. But I don't think it's a coincidence at all. I think it's a harbinger. I think it's a prophetic thing that God's passing judgment across the U.S. And no one wants to believe, oh, our country can be bad and do bad things. And look, our people are good, but our government that is taken over, they're not good, and they don't care about what's good for our people, our country, our values, or for the future of our nation. All they care about is pushing their agenda for a one world government. And that's the problem. And these two ideologies aren't going to survive. One's going to live, one's going to die. So that's just like the whole pride thing in Christianity. They can't coexist. One's going to live, one's going to die. One's going to destroy the other. Now we know ultimately God's going to win, but we're going to pass through hell to get there. And there's going to be a lot of pain and suffering along the way, sadly. And I hate to see that. And I love my country. I love what my country was created to stand for, the values it stood for, the people. I love my people, and I don't want to see harm come to those people, and I don't want to see the loss of our values, our sense of freedom and independence and liberty. Um, I would rather die than lose those things, because I don't want to live in a world that those aren't values anymore, and we're quickly heading to that direction. Quickly heading to that direction. But anyway, that's enough for now. Um, it's a heavy topic, so you can't stay on that point for too long. But anyway, I wish everyone the best. Thank you so much for coming and helping the show. Please subscribe if you haven't. Tell your friends about it. And if you got any stories, you can contact me at HarbingerReport@yahoo.com. And I try my best. I'm pretty busy, so if I don't respond right away, don't get offended. I'll try to get back to you as best I can. Um, and and thanks for coming, and leave the lights on.